Welcome to Labor Talks, a podcast by NJASAP and for NJASAP that shares important news and information that you consume on your schedule. Labor Talks will tackle vital topics like safety, contract administration, the labor management relationship, and how to navigate life as a NetJets pilot. And we will bring this information to you with the help of experienced union leaders, industry consultants, and subject matter experts. Whether you listen in your car, on the treadmill, or while working on tasks around your home, Labor Talks is a worthy investment of your time and attention. Join your fellow pilots and advocates as Labor Talks.
Hi, everyone. Before we jump into part 3 of the Captain Upgrade series, I would just like to state a correction to part 2 of this series and shout out to the new volunteer who brought it to my attention. If you upgrade out of fleet, you will start a brand new 39-month lock. For example, you're hired into the Latitude, and after 26 months, you get your upgrade award to the Phenom. That 26-month lock goes away, and your lock becomes 39 months. This is for first-time upgrades. I hope this correction provided some clarification from the previous episode. By all means, reach out to podcast@njasap.com if you do have clarifying questions or if you hear something that might not seem right. But without further ado, please enjoy part 3 of the Captain Upgrade series.
Welcome to Labor Talks. I'm your host, Dawsen Pietro, and with me today, co-host Clare Carey. You are listening to the final installment of our series on Captain Upgrades, and with special guest Paul Flynn.
All right, before we dive into speaking with special guest Paul Flynn on upgrade timelines and trends that have been seen, I'd like to just offer a correction to our previous episode. So in episode 2, we discussed equipment locks, and I misspoke as it relates to equipment locks for in-fleet upgrades. So in-fleet upgrades, you will have a new 39-month lock. That 39-month lock does not get added to your existing lock. It just restarts a new 39-month lock for an out-of-fleet upgrade. So please, that correction was brought to us by one of our newest volunteers. So if at any point any of you guys hear anything that doesn't sound quite right, we do go through edits and checks to make sure the information is correct, to make sure we're delivering the best information for you. However, we're not perfect. So if you hear anything that seems a little suspect, by all means, shoot us an email, podcast@njasap.com. But diving on in, Dawsen, you just completed your line check.
I did.
How did that go?
It was good. Definitely had some almost check ride nerves, if you would say.
Sure.
But the captain I was with was very reassuring, and he made it feel like just a normal flight. And that's what it was. It was quick. It was Austin to Dallas. So that's kind of the trend that I've seen with others, is they try to keep it relatively short and primarily within larger airports. From what I've seen, I don't think there's any set tax on what it has to be other than over 100 miles. But as of that, it was, like I said, it was as normal as a flight as you can make it, even though I knew that I was getting examined. Everything was as normal. We briefs for normal. It was just like flying with another captain on the line. And I can't speak for all check airmen, but he made it feel very normal, which I was grateful for.
So you mentioned kind of having some jitters similar to pre-check ride jitters. How does a line check in the airplane compare to the check rides we experience in the simulator?
It's honestly, it's simple. It's more simple in a way that you know exactly what's going to get thrown at you. There's nothing they can do to, like in a sim, like fail issues. It's a normal flight, and they're not able to, have any gotchas. However, like, they can make mistakes too, just like any FO or captain you're flying with. And, there's some things that they miss. And just like any other flight, you'd be like, hey, like, do you want to do this? Or like, you want to put those speeds in for me? But he was very reassuring, and that really did help.
So it sounds like you should just treat it like a normal day, a normal flight.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Must be good to have that out of the way.
It does. Yeah. I got lucky. Some people have been waiting multiple months, which I think there's no rhyme or reason to it. But the check airman I was with was Dallas based, as I was, same start date. So I think he kind of just lined up properly. He was doing multiple that day. So kind of worked out. So I just was 1 week off of So hopefully, I think they're trying to get people in as quickly as possible.
Excellent. All right. So moving on, Paul Flynn, welcome to Labor Talks.
Happy to be back.
All right. So we'd love to dive into kind of some of the upgrade timelines and trends that you have seen in your experience here at NetJets. For me, it took 26 months, new hire to captain award. Dawsen, I think you had a similar...
Yeah, 29 months. Yeah.
Right. How was your experience, Paul?
Mine was upwards of 15 to 16 years.
How many months is that?
That's a lot of months. Yeah, I mean, as it is, anyone who understands how the pendulum of aviation swings, there's a few here folks that have seen 18-month upgrades, which most everyone will recognize as an outlier for timeliness, but directly proportional to the beginning of a growth phase or hiring phase for a carrier. Basically, just the once upon a time for my group, hiring was going pretty well through 01, 05, and onward. But as 2008 progressed, the majority or a good portion of the upgrade availability ended up to be just right-sizing fleets, so people moving out of previous captain positions into more desirable ones, which absorbed, I would say, the majority of those upgrades that were offered through 2008. And then, of course, coasting into 2009 with the situation in the financial markets and the stories that relate to that, upgrades were the least of our concerns. We ended up resulting in a furlough of 495 of our pilots, with concerns that number would increase over the coming years. Which brings us through basically the teens. Not only were there no upgrades, but there was also no hiring, which all goes into the recipe that led to, in 2018 or so, my cadre of pilots and seniority began to upgrade. It looked like that was going to pick up some momentum and continue onward until we hit the next massive speed bump, which happened to be COVID-19. Mm-hmm. That came around and returned to a growth period faster than I think a lot of us had expected. It was able to be capitalized upon, but I think with your hirings in 2021, at the very front end of the hiring, which is why you were both in the upper 20-month upgrade timeline, shows that as the population grew, we hit that tipping point of around 65 to 67 percentile, and the growth led to additional upgrades, which you all felt at about that 2.5 or 2 year mark or so, but then also that peak of other folks that were coming in the 22, 23 timeframe that saw those incredible 18-month timeline upgrades.
What advice would you give to newer listeners who were told maybe, they've been on property for those 18 to 24 months and they say, I'm at least 1, 2, 3 more years away from on this timeline of upgrading. And a lot of people, which are disappointed because they were told something that they're now not getting. Coming from a perspective from you who waited 15 years, what advice, mindset, or attitude would you give those individuals?
Well, as with anything, this topic has its own, but trying to forecast in aviation is a black science of its own. And it's all transactional at the moment. So right now, if an upgrade is, say, 3 years or 36 months, you'd have to have indicators to show it maintaining that, which is proportional growth, attrition, as it were, and other indicators otherwise. But generally speaking, as you look at this curve, the expectation would be that upgrade times are going to, if not extend a bit further, unless growth projections are able to capture that. But the best advice I can give anyone is mind the seat you're in, know the seat you're in. If you're going to try to forecast or predict, be as conservative as possible.
Right. Good point.
Well, I hope Paul Flynn shed some light on the history of upgrades in the last 20 years here at NetJets. Kind of touched on expectations over the course of this 3-part series, as well as advice. But it never hurts to reiterate such things. But let's speak to your experience, Dawsen. What did you expect going into upgrade, and what may have surprised you?
Yeah, my expectations was that the process was going to be pretty smooth, and it went smoother than expected. I think my biggest question mark going in was the timing of everything, because of hearing people, waiting long periods of time or short periods of time based off, things we've already talked about. But for me, I got the luckier end of the side of things when it came to that. Right after getting done with flight safety and charm school, I only waited a few days before going out in IOE. It was 5 days of quick flying, getting signed off, and then having getting my new schedule selection, and literally the first day of being on my new schedule, having that line check set up. That definitely probably won't be the standard for everyone. So going into it, being okay with waiting multiple months for that line check or multiple time interruptions between each stage. And sometimes that's just how it works out, sadly. But stay in the books, be ready every day for that line check, because it could change. It could, there's an availability that can come up and they are able to airline you in somewhere and get that done or whatnot. So yeah, the expectations of, being just ready to go was still there, but it could have been, multiple more months. And if that's you, then, you just got to keep your head in the books and keep doing what you're doing and treat every flight like a line check. So you're not having to change any of your cadence or any of your normal habits you're doing on the line just because you're on a line check or just because you're with a normal captain.
Yeah, which kind of brings us to how best to prepare going into either upgrade sims, captain upgrade, training with the company, your IOE, your line check. Use the resources who are right next to you. Ask the pilots you fly with, their experience and how they prepared. Maybe they have some tips and tricks that you never thought of. As you said, hit the books. And as we've discussed in the previous episodes, adjust your mindset. Get into that captain mindset ahead of when you intend to upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know also we've been touching a lot on an in-fleet type because that's where both me and you came out of. I do want to touch on, I know coming from a different fleet and knowing how to become a captain all at the same time could be a little more heavy. There's going to be more leeway in a way, with your timing and training scenarios and, going into the blocks of IOE, which we talked about last time. So you're going to have more aid to that. However, definitely reach out to your peers, people that have been on that fleet for a period of time. They will have insight, and don't be afraid to ask for help wherever that may be.
As always, thank you all for listening to this 3-part series on Captain Upgrade. As Dawsen said, we're here if at all you need help, you have questions, you can reach out to your mentor, your stewards, NJASAP in general. So thanks for joining us for today's edition of Labor Talks. If you want to learn more about today's episode, have questions or episode ideas or corrections, please contact podcast@njasap.com.
Thank you for joining us today on another episode of Labor Talks. If you haven't already done so, please follow NJASAP on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @NJASAP. Show your support for the union with comments, likes, and shares. If you enjoyed this episode, encourage your fellow NJASAP members to tune in, and please share recommendations for future podcast episodes with us at podcast@njasap.com. Stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, this is Labor Talks, presented by NJASAP.